Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on Pub Stomp MTG. So with this video, I'm going to go over Ojer Axonil Deepest Might. So with the new Lost Caverns of Ixalan set, we're returning to dinosaurs, vampires, merfolk, and pirates, but we're also going to introduce gods to the set. This is very exciting because gods are one of those things where I feel like can be done very right. For example, with Theros, I love that set with all the gods. I wish Call Time did a little better with their gods. That's just me personally. I feel like that was kind of a letdown. Amonkhet was okay, but they weren't the best in my opinion, so let's see how this compares to the other gods. So Ojer Axonil Deepest Might is a legendary creature god for 2 and 2 red. It does have trample. If a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ojer Axonil's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to Ojer Axonil's power instead. And when it does die, return to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. And it does transform into Temple of Power, so it's just a land, it just taps for red mana. And it does have an activated ability by paying 2 and 1 red and tapping it. You transform it, activate only if a red sources you control deal 4 or more non-combat damage this turn, and only as a sorcery. So I like this because if your commander does die, say for example he's your commander, he could just be flipped into the Temple of Power and can kind of ramp you ahead. And if you do deal a lot of damage that turn, you can just flip him back into the god. So this is pretty powerful, and I feel like there's a lot of things that you can do to make this absolutely busted. But honestly, this could be very abused in a lot of different situations, and let's go over today some of those ways you could abuse this. So what's really neat about Ojer Axonil is the fact that he'll deal damage based off of his power. Say for example, you deal 1 damage to somebody and Ojer Axonil's power is 4, you'll then deal 4 damage instead of that 1 damage that you would have done. But why not make his power even bigger? Say for example, we use cards like Rush of Blood for 2 and a red. Target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn where X is its power. So our commander, instead of being a 4/4, will be a 8/4, and say for example we deal that 1 damage to somebody, instead of 1 damage it'll become 8 damage. In a similar sense, we could use a card like Unleash Fury for 1 and a red, double the power of target creature until end of turn. So again, it'll make the power of our commander an 8/4 instead of a 4/4, but say for example we use Rush of Blood and also Unleash Fury, you can make Ojer Axonil's power into a 16/4. That's quite insane, especially if you pair this with like a Grape Shot. The more storm counters you do have on this, the greater the effect will be, dealing 16 damage all over the place. But we can have a repeatable effect of giving Ojer Axonil double the power by having 2-handed axe. Whenever equipped creature attacks, double its power until end of turn. So yeah, another scenario where Ojer Axonil will become an 8/4, then if we do ping our opponent with a 1 damage spell, it'll become an 8 damage spell. So yeah, literally quite insane, all for that ability. And again, it is repeatable with 2-handed battle axe, so this is an excellent option in the deck. Another useful option I do want to mention is Commander's Plate. For 1 mana, equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. So with Ojer Axonil on the battlefield, this will essentially become a 7/7 protection from black, blue, white, and green. And this is the real reason why Atraxa died, is so that she couldn't face the might of Ojer Axonil having protection from her. All jokes aside, this is a very good card. Just mainly having protection from any color that's not red is pretty incredible. And the more power we can give to Ojer Axonil, the better damage we will give to our opponents. One last card I do want to highlight is pretty incredible with Mishra's Command. For X and a red, you choose target player, they discard up to X cards, then they draw a card for each card discarded this way, so obviously we're going to be picking ourselves. The second mode reads, this spell deals X damage to target creature, or the spell deals X damage to target player on that third mode. And then the fourth mode reads, target creature gets +X/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. So I will say this is a very slept on card. You could get card selection, and on top of that you could remove a creature on the board that's a big threat. And on top of that, you could pump Ojer Axonil's power so that the next card that you do play, you could just burn everybody to the ground. So I do like this card for the versatility. However, there's also some other options we do want to talk about with burn. So there are a lot of burn spells we can play, but we want to have lasting effects. Say for example we have these pingers like Gutter Snipe, Fiery Inscription, Airborne Flamesmith, or Kestic Flame Breather. For me personally, whether you're playing instant sorceries or non-creature spells, you'll deal damage with all these options. For Gutter Snipe you'll deal 2 damage, Fiery Inscription you'll deal 2 damage, Airborne Flamesmith you'll deal 1 damage, and Kestic Flame Breather you will deal 1 damage. But of course if Ojer Axonil is on the battlefield, that doesn't even matter because they're all going to deal 4 damage each time you cast an instant sorcery or for example a non-creature spell. And trust me, there's about like 30 instant or sorcery spells that we could really abuse these triggers so that we could deal a lot of damage with our commander. So yeah, these are quite crazy, especially when you have multiple of these effects on the battlefield. We do have another amped up version of these effects with Urabrask and also on the backside the Great Work. So with Urabrask, this is an amazing card. I do actually have a commander deck of my own with Urabrask. It's just a great storm commander in general because it does have first strike, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent and you add a red mana. Also in this type of deck, it's very easy to flip into his Saga side, the Great Work, so it does have 3 different lore chapters. For the first lore chapter, it deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. For the second lore chapter, you create 3 treasure tokens. Then for the last lore chapter, you essentially have a Yawgmoth's Will until end of turn with any graveyard. Then it will flip back into Urabrask, and then you can constantly add red mana by casting spells from the graveyard and dealing 1 damage to target opponent each time. And with Ojer Axonil on the battlefield, we can deal 4 damage each time we're casting an instant or sorcery spell. So no pun intended, Urabrask is really putting the great work in this deck. So aside from creatures dealing damage, we do also have some great instant and sorcery spells like Grape Shot. I previously mentioned this, but I do want to go over it. So for 1 and a red, Grape Shot deals 1 damage to any target, but there's more. Obviously, with Storm, when you cast a spell, you copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. So obviously, the more spells you do cast before Grape Shot, the better effect this will become. Say, for example, you casted 5 spells before this. You will copy Grape Shot 5 times, so in total, you're going to deal 6 damage spread out. But wait, if we do have Ojer Axonil on the battlefield, instead of 6 damage being spread around, it's going to be 24 damage. Obviously, each individual trigger of 1 damage is going to become 4 damage. So it's not like you can spread it however you'd like, but 4 damage at a time is quite insane by itself, and obviously the more power Ojer Axonil does have by doubling its power, the greater this effect will be. Another gem in this deck would be Acidic Soil. So for 2 and a red, it's a sorcery spell. It deals 1 damage to each player for each land he or she controls. So I know the one downside of this card is the fact that it will damage us, but it'll only damage us by 1 damage each time. Say for example we have 5 lands on the battlefield, we'll just get 5 damage, but if we do have an opponent that does have a green deck and they have about 10 lands they ramped into on the battlefield, we could easily make them take 40 damage. That's literally quite insane with Ojer Axonil. So after talking about that scenario, the trade-off seems fine where I'll take 1 damage per land while all our opponents will take 4 damage per land. But why stop there? There are also some other great effects that we could take advantage of, like Warmonger and Pyrohemia. Warmonger has a pretty incredible ability. So for 2 mana, Warmonger deals 1 damage to each creature without flying in each player. Any player may play this ability. In most scenarios, you're probably not going to activate this more than twice each turn because you don't want to kill Warmonger. I mean, your opponents can activate this too to kill it, but your opponents will probably take about 12 damage if Ojer Axonil is on the battlefield, so that is the price to pay for that. But even in a better situation with Pyrohemia for 2 and 2 red, at the beginning of your end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, you sacrifice Pyrohemia. And it also does have the ability for 1 red, Pyrohemia deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. So I would say in most situations, you probably don't want to activate this more than 4 times because you might just kill Ojer Axonil because he does have 4 toughness. But let's just say, for example, this is on the battlefield and Ojer Axonil is on the battlefield. You activate this 3 times on your turn. You will deal 12 damage to each opponent. Then you could just go to the next turn, and if you do have more mana to spend into Pyrohemia, you could repeat the process by dealing 12 more damage to each opponent. Then so on and so forth until you burn everybody out on the table. So Pyrohemia and Ojer Axonil are a great combination together. But why stop there? Why not just punish our opponents for playing Magic? So in this deck, I did decide to go with a Punisher theme if you want to go the extra step of being evil. So for example, we do have Harsh Mentor for 1 and 1 red. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield, if it's not a mana ability, Harsh Mentor deals 2 damage to that player. So the more time goes on when people are activating abilities of their commanders or other creatures they do control or artifacts, the more we can inflict more damage on our opponents. But why not take it a step further by using cards like Burning Earth or Mana Barbs? These essentially punish our opponents for tapping lands. For Burning Earth, it has that ability whenever a player taps a non-basic land for mana, Burning Earth deals 1 damage to that player. So I have noticed the shift where people don't really play basics anymore, especially if they're playing 4 to 5 color decks. Even 3 color decks, I don't really see basics anymore. So this could really take advantage of them and really deal some insane damage to them with Ojer Axonil. And the same does go for Mana Barbs. Whenever a player taps for a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player. So these are very different in the fact that Burning Earth focuses on non-basics. Mana Barb just doesn't care, it doesn't discriminate. Any type of land you do use, you will take 1 damage. I will say this does include ourselves, but this is going into that trade-off scenario where you're taking 1 damage, and with Ojer Axonil, our opponents are going to be taking 4 damage for each time they tap a land. So again, that's a very good trade-off in Commander. Other enchantments to consider are Roiling Vortex and Sulfuric Vortex. So for a Roiling Vortex for 1 and a red, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, Roiling Vortex deals 1 damage to them. So of course we're going to take the 1 damage, but our opponents are going to take the 4 damage with our commander out on the battlefield. And whenever they do play a free spell, they'll take an additional 5 damage for playing that spell. So Roiling Vortex is incredible. And on top of that, you can pay a red mana so that your opponents can't gain life. With the other Vortex, it's very similar to Roiling Vortex. Instead of 1 damage, our opponents and ourselves will take 2 damage, but again, we're taking 2 damage, our opponents are taking 4 damage, and a player would gain life, that player gains no life instead. So these are very similar cards in a similar fashion. I do like Roiling Vortex just a little more because it is 1 less mana, and on top of that, we're going to be taking 1 damage. Our opponents are going to take 4 damage, so I feel like overall this is a better card than Sulfuric Vortex, but both are great options in the deck because we're going to really amplify the damage and really swing the life totals of our opponents. And the next card I do want to talk about is pretty meta dependent. Depending on how much artifacts our opponents are playing, this might not be the best, but if our opponents are playing a lot of artifacts, Ancient Runes is going to be quite insane. So for 2 and a red, during each player's upkeep, Ancient Runes deals 1 damage to that player for each artifact he or she controls. So let's just go into an example. Say for example, one of our opponents has about 5 artifacts on the battlefield. Ancient Runes will trigger at their upkeep and deal 1 damage for each artifact they do control. So they will essentially take 20 damage just off of the artifacts they do control with Ancient Runes and with Ojer Axonil on the battlefield. So the greedier your opponents are with artifacts, the more you can punish them with Ancient Runes. So this is a good option in the deck, no question about it. Another card I do want to mention is Zozu the Punisher. This is just an excellent card in the deck because there's a lot of people that like to play ramp decks, and usually they will go unchecked because obviously mass land destruction is frowned upon in Commander, and the one unspoken rule in Commander is don't mess with my lands. That kind of made green a little bit more powerful because obviously there's a lot of ramp packages you could have by using Cultivates, Kodama's Reaches, 3 Visits, and all these things to put extra lands on the battlefield so that they could get ahead while these other colors that are not in green will get left behind. So that's why I do like Zozu the Punisher, is the fact that whenever a land enters the battlefield, Zozu the Punisher will deal 2 damage to that land's controller. So this will punish decks in general, but it'll especially punish those green decks who try to ramp too much because they'll take 2 damage or even 4 damage with our commander out on the battlefield. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Ojer Axonil Deepest Might. But I will say, they keep printing these interesting burn commanders. I don't know what options to pick. This one looks really enticing for me personally. I don't know whether to put this in the 99 of my Urbrask deck or make a deck of its own and replace Urbrask with this. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think of Ojer Axonil Deepest Might? How would you build around him? This is a very insane burn commander in my opinion. The way the damage will stack up, especially if you use a lot of those punishing effects or even just burn spells in general, this is going to be a crazy commander to build around. So if you will, hit that like button and also subscribe. I am trying to hit 10,000 followers by the end of the year. I believe it can be done, but in order to get there, obviously I would love for you to subscribe. So if you can hit that subscribe button, that would be appreciated. But I'll tell you what, I am so excited for Ixalan and all the things that are to come with it. Hopefully we do get more gods than just Ojer Ojer Axonil? It looks like we will be, just based off of the spoilers that we did receive a couple days ago and also some of the images that were released. So with all that said, thank you for stomping by.